This is the kind of game that's so big and great and polished, it's hard to even find anything to say about it. And maybe it's not because it's so big and great and polished, but because of the way it's put together. It's so slick, you know? It's made in a way that sort of makes you forget that you're even playing a video game. You know, with this game I briefly thought about revising my statement from my Gothic 2 video where I was like, I don't think we'll see another game like this, where the design is mostly informed by the narrative reality it is trying to present. But on second glance, I don't think that applies here. The thing is, Red Dead Redemption 2 is very seamless, you know? All the little and the big mechanics are structured and formulaic, but the presentation is integrated into the game world enough to make it not appear very gamey, you know? Or arcadey, if you will. Do people still use that phrase? So you don't necessarily feel like you're playing through separate sequences. Like, missions are clearly marked, and afterwards you get almost like a little scorecard you can pull up that tells you about little in-mission challenges you could have done had you known about them. That's a weird mechanic. But anyway, I think what ties the missions into the rest of the game is that characters and the world don't behave differently outside of them. Like, they will talk to you when you walk past them, and you have contextual answers to their barks. And the rest of the little interactions with NPCs don't feel gamey either. So with all the little mechanics and the little opportunities for making money and XP and loot, the game treats it all like it's part of the world you're in. So that, I think, should be appreciated. But this kind of design approach didn't come from nothing, right? It's a very Rockstar design style that they carried over from GTA. From the way mechanics are welded into the game world to things like the animations and the character controls. So, as is the case with many aspects of a game, you could categorize controls into immersive and gamey types, right? So in GTA and in this game, they took the immersive approach. So you sort of remote control your character, and he interacts with the game world in a way that's consistent with the game world. So him moving like a human takes priority over him being responsive to your input. And in contrast, the gamey approach would have you retain direct control, meaning the game would translate your input into movements for the player character unadulterated, and then the character's animations would sort of mime what's happening, right? That's how you get stuff like floaty jumping animations in some games, because the character will go airborne the moment you hit the button with no run-up, so no crouching beforehand. Or you could get your character clipping through the environment or not interacting with things in a believable manner. Like, you would have interact animations that are more symbolic, like a hand wave, instead of touching the actual object, you know? The advantage of that stuff is your input feels immediate, and you as a player are immersed more deeply into the game world, if you will. But the game world itself feels less immersive because it's presented in a way that's less faithful to what's supposed to be happening there. With the immersive approach to designing controls, in this game, you instruct your guy to, say, pick up an item, and then he will move into position and grab it at his convenience, right? Sometimes you will try to move somewhere, but your character is obstructed, not simply by a collider, but some pathfinding issue, right? So he may seem kind of stubborn at times. Funnily enough, when you're on a horse, that makes narrative sense, and it is even used as a feature sometimes, right? Like, your horse can buck and disobey movement orders if it gets spooked by a snake or something. So the game world seems very slick in its presentation now, but to make the controls feel responsive, you'll need a lot of contextual animation and mechanics. And for the most part, this game pulls it off. And this stuff matches the rest of the game design too, right? Imagine if they'd taken the gamey route, the whole game would feel very arcadey and the atmosphere would be ruined. The cutscenes would feel out of place and stuff. By the way, in place of gamey versus immersive, you could say, like, direct versus discrete when talking controls. Maybe that sounds more scholarly. Anyway, so then there's a GUI, which is integrated via context sensitivity, so it only shows you what you need to know at any given moment, which is generally a good approach to GUI, I think. So you will be waltzing through the game, and at certain points you will get button prompts and text hints that tell you about some new mechanic you didn't know about. So there's lots to do in the game world, but you're not beat over the head with any of it. So it's not a map clearing game like some of the, say, Ubisoft games we've seen. Not saying those don't have their own appeal, but it's a different approach, right? So in this game, there's this constant feeling of having an unknown amount of content that you could run into at any given point. There are random encounters that range from very small to lengthy quests and quest chains. There are simulated systems that are intricate and obfuscated enough as to hint at something more. Like, I don't know how exactly animal behavior works, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a whole ecosystem and stuff. But it doesn't have to be, it just has to appear authentic, right? So this whole design philosophy, I think, was apparent in GTA, but when the game isn't showing prompts or whatever, I'm not getting the impression that I'm playing Wild West GTA. Even though that's essentially what it is. But the tone is very different. This game has a much more serious feel. You know, in GTA, almost every character was a goofy caricature, which was fun as well. But here the characters are usually more down to earth, save for some of the random encounter characters. Those can be noticeably more kooky, specifically the ones where you can turn in certain collectibles. But the characters in main missions and the ones in your camp, that's your home base, are generally more serious, except for that one uppity chick who is just an arrogant boss bitch, but she's presented like that's meant to be endearing. I guess you can't get away without any blemishes in modern writing. But for the most part, Red Dead Redemption 2 has a very authentic feel. But with all the authentic presentation, I wonder though how true to the real period it really is. Disregarding the obvious goofiness of a single man killing hundreds of people and whatnot, and the mechanics associated with that. Like, from what I've heard, guns weren't that accurate back then. Then again, they have a couple reasonably modern ones in there as well, seeing as the game is set very late in the Wild West era. 1899, I think. Anyway, the whole game world with the little towns and the little shops and the way the folk talk and react seems very authentic. And the game has that Wild West flavor that you like from all the Western movies, but without the goofiness of old-timey filmmaking, right? And the music, too, is distinctly Western, but not goofy at all. So that's quite an achievement. And what's great about a big old game like this is it connects you more closely to the world than like a Western movie would. Like, it's more true to the Western theme than any Western movie ever could be, right? Anyway, that's my segue to talking about the hunting and crafting system. So the game gives you that frontier lifestyle. So you hunt animals, you skin them, then fry up the meat at the campfire you can set up. But all that stuff feels different from your run-of-the-mill open-world survival craft game, which is a genre now, in that those mechanics are framed in a believable game world with characters and stuff, so you don't feel like it's just you that you're sustaining. In a direct way, you can sell your game or bring it to your folks and support them. Like your game meat, not the video game. So that ties it together neatly. Now, graphically, it looks amazing, as you can see. The environment looks so lush. You know, there was a time when I thought at some point we'd move past just using height maps or displacement maps and putting clutter on top for terrain, and instead all AAA games would use, I don't know, voxels and marching cubes or metaballs or whatever it's called. But apparently they still use height maps and just put more stuff on top. Use higher resolution height maps, use more and more detailed layered textures, more diverse flora and whatnot. So it seems like you can just brute force through any aesthetic problem if you have enough graphics performance to play with, right? And then once you hit the pixel limit of your screen resolution, you're not getting any better of a picture when it comes to stuff like grass and brush, right? Anyway, this game looks fantastic, and I think these kinds of games don't get enough credit for that. It's the thing with visual art, most people only appreciate it subconsciously unless it's really in your face. Like, very striking. You know, low complexity with, say, high contrast, sharp silhouettes, that kind of thing. Or if it's a visual style that's out of the ordinary. And on naturalistic graphical styles, you often see indie games strive for that, but I think AAA games with their massive budgets place the bar so high it's practically pointless to try, if you ask me. From the stuff I see, some indie developers think they can match the AAA look close enough to compete using bought assets and some strong pre-made lighting courtesy of the Unreal Engine. But if you just buy like a couple of sets of photorealistic assets, for one thing they may not match up well, since there will probably still be design differences or differences in fidelity. And secondly, you will still have to fill the gaps with assets of your own, and they have to reach that bar as well. So I generally don't think you can cheat your way around actually making your game. But that's a discussion for another video, I guess. Anyway, AAA games get a bad rap these days. People are like, they're all the same, they suck, no innovation, they release full of bugs and stuff. Okay, the last one might be true for some. But for the most part, I think AAA games don't get enough credit for how well crafted they are. And the odd bug or two doesn't make them garbage to me either. I remember the way people would lament the fact that most AAA games would routinely get high review scores back when review scores were relevant. But the truth is those games usually are pretty good, because basically you can just throw money at a project and end up with something that's well up to par. The writing may still be bad, but the craftsmanship will usually be excellent. But this game, Red Dead Redemption 2, was generally well received, right? Maybe it's just one of those trailblazer games, and then people expect that depth from all AAA games of that genre. Is that fair, though? I mean, if you've played the best game of a genre, is every other game in that genre really garbage now? I think there's a conversation about player expectations in here too that could fill a video of its own. You know the way games sometimes get an unfair rap because people thought it'd be something else or something more, judging from the marketing or the look of it when compared to other games. Anyway, back to Red Dead Redemption 2. This game, I think, does set itself apart from other open-world story missions, side missions, shooting games. It isn't just a great game of that genre, but it has its own tone and style, not only in the writing, but the design of every interaction between player and player character, as well as between character and environment. And I think it's distinctly Rockstar's style, which goes to show that it's not the silliness and the funny dialogues that made GTA what it was, but the design approach to everything in it, which is seamless with hidden depths you can step into every so often, and is presented in a somewhat simple way, but there's lots going on under the surface. So, good game. Hey, I made a game too. It's not that big, but it doesn't try to be either, and anyway, why not check it out? Slasher's Keep is a first-person roguelike with a focus on melee combat and loot. It has randomly generated dungeons with orcs, mole rats, and other monsters to fight, lots of loot to find, and a drag-and-drop weapon crafting system. I made it all by my lonesome, and it's available for PC on Steam.